Good evening. This is my voice. The voice that has been telling you about the marvel of the natural world for 60 years. The voice that made you gasp at the great beauty of Siberian tigers and shiver while an iguana barely made his escape from a den of snakes. Fantastic, isn't it? Tonight, I am going to tell you a story. It is a story that needs to be understood and remembered. It is a story that will reveal the spectacular variety of life, from the clicking of children to the laughter of insects. I am going to guide you through the wilderness. Are you ready? Are you ready to get wild? Are you ready to get wild again?
Yeah, so what other voice to open this evening than the voice we're going to be talking about tonight, the voice of David Attenborough, and I'm very happy that you gave him a warm welcome already. For those who are there who actually thought he might be walking in anytime soon, this really is the last moment of disappointment. But as to ease your pain, if you still think that David Attenborough might be coming, to have a little bit of a balm for your pain, I do have this, and this is a handwritten letter by David Attenborough. And in order to explain what this handwritten letter does in my hands, I will have to tell a bit of a story myself. Is that because a couple of years ago it was sort of a good tradition here in the Bali to gather each month and to start birding in the Bali, vogelen in the Bali. We would pick one bird every month, and then we would look at that bird in the Bali, obviously. We would study the bird, and we would learn a bunch of things about habitat, wingspan, plumage. But more often than not, we learned more about ourselves than we did about the bird. So it was actually combining art history and biology. And ultimately, we sort of used this bird, if I may say so, to turn the mirror upon ourselves. And we learned a bit about the place that nature holds in society. And if I can explain this evening what we're about to do here tonight, we're birding again. We're birding in the Bali, but this time the bird of paradise that we're looking at is Sir David Attenborough. And that's the bird that we're going to look at tonight. And I hope so that by looking at Sir David Attenborough, just like we did with the birds, we might learn a little bit about ourselves. We might learn a little bit about the past century of naturalism, 98 years of life by Sir David Attenborough. And we might learn a little bit about nature. And in the other room right now, they're discussing the rise of authoritarianism and the appeal of the radical right. And so many of you might wonder, are there not better ways to spend our evening? Can we not discuss other characters that are sort of taking over the world, much less admirable than David Attenborough? And to those people I say, yes, probably, yeah. There's probably better ways to spend your evening, but also no. Because by looking at Sir David Attenborough, and so by looking at the way nature has a place in our society, we might learn a little bit more about why nature is at such a bad state and why we have work to be doing. So welcome, birding in the Bali once again. And actually, before I continue, I have to explain about the letter, of course. This letter was sent by David Attenborough to me, and there's actually a picture on the slides as well, so you can read with me. We were doing an evening about this bird, the Parotia. It's a bird that lives in West Papua, and is one of the most iconic scenes from the Planet Earth series. And it dances around in order to attract a mate, but first it cleans the stage. So it sets the stage for itself, much like we're going to be doing later. And my colleague, who doesn't work here anymore, Luc, he sent him a very appealing letter. And he asked him, Sir David, could you please say something about this bird in your iconic voice and welcome the people to the Bali for tonight? You only have to record your voice. That's all we ask you to do. Please do so. Signed, Luc X. And then David Attenborough responded this. Oh, this is the bird, yeah.
Each male bird of paradise has a unique
Just so you know.
for attracting mates. And none is more extraordinary than the one that takes place on this stage.
Let's have a bit of a look anyway.
For the owner, the Western Parotia, there's work to be done first. clears his court of the night's fallen debris. It's a vital chore if you want to attract a mate. Females only visit the tidiest courts. So one rogue leaf might ruin his chances. Perfect. His obsessive housework pays off. And a female drops in for a closer look. Now is his chance to really impress. But it won't be easy. Females are very fussy, and she'd expect his carefully choreographed routine to be faultless. He opens with a bow. Next, his blue eye must flash yellow. So far, so good. He has all the moves. Fancy footwork. The whirling dervish. Head-pulling shuffle with spin. Her erect head feathers and quivering wings are a very encouraging sign. His sidestep and head bob look good from any angle. But his crowning glory can only be appreciated from her perspective. Wait for it.
The grand finale.
There it is, a flash of his iridescent throat patch.
Tot daar.
Her excitement grows.
Yeah. And now we can go to the letter, so we skip the paintings for now. So obviously Luc wanted to have David Attenborough say something about this Perosia bird, and this is the response that he got. I'm not going to imitate him, so I'm just going to say it in my... I will not go that far, Sir David. Dear Luc X, thank you for your letter. I'm very flattered that you might suggest that I might contribute to one of your sessions. I hope you will forgive me, however, if I do not take up on the idea. Best wishes, David Attenborough. So, that says something about his character, because tonight we're going to talk more about his character. We're going to talk about what makes David Attenborough such a great storyteller, what are his strategies, what is his life, his physicality, his motivation, his appearance, his habits, his tics. And ultimately, I think this evening will oscillate between admiration, on the one hand, for his narrative strength, but also critique. And we analyze whether Sir David Attenborough, in the end, brings us closer to nature or further from it. And to do that tonight, here is Agat Sharma. I want you all to give him a warm applause. So tonight, Agat, welcome. We'll be diving in Sir David Attenborough, and in doing so, we'll be diving into one of your obsessions. Am I correct in saying that?
Yeah, partly, because I think David Attenborough is an obsession of mine, because I'm obsessed probably with how we imagine nature.
Okay.
Yeah, so it's not, but yes, he holds a special place in my heart.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
David Attenborough represents to you how we view, or we want to view, nature.
Yeah, I grew up looking at Attenborough films, and so I recognized his voice immediately, and it meant something important for me in understanding nature, in thinking about nature, and I think for a lot of us, it means the same.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You grew up in Jaipur.
I grew up in India, in Jaipur, so and I don't remember the first film about nature that I saw was Gods Must Be Crazy, and then at some point I saw David Attenborough, and I started to think about his voice maybe 3 or 4 years ago when I came to Amsterdam to study a master's in theater. And a lot of my colleagues were actually from South America, and they had never heard of him.
Never heard of David
They did
Attenborough.
not recognize his face or his voice.
Not even his voice.
Not even his voice. And that was really interesting because, and then I was like, oh, why so? And then I realized that, well, the colonizers were different. That it's the Spanish-speaking world, they have maybe other people talking about their nature.
Yeah.
And the British Empire had David Attenborough.
So wherever the English Empire was able to spread their language,
yes.
that's also where David Attenborough is now big.
Became popular because he was British Overseas Services. The BBC had these overseas service, which he, of course, at some point his programs were aired on it, and the point was to stop, to kind of create a counter propaganda against, say, the Russian propaganda about, this part of the world. So that's how I got to know of David.
Yeah.
And I was looking for a voice. I was looking really for a voice whom we really like to listen to about nature. And I was thinking a lot about ecological change and the things we all know about now. And I was thinking, in whose voice should I speak?
Yeah.
That we listen. My voice was not with my accent and my. It wasn't. David's voice is this, right? So,
and just to clarify, you're a theater maker.
I am a theater maker.
You're an artist in residence here at the Bali, and you were looking for a voice in order to make theater, I suppose.
Yeah. I was making a lot of work about ecological change in India, and I was looking for a voice which I could ask to speak and tell what's happening so that it's taken seriously. Because things that have been going on, and looks like they will continue to go on like this.
And you needed someone to narrate that in a way that at least the entire English-speaking world would listen.
Yeah, and at that time I thought the whole world will listen. Yeah. But then slowly I realized that he also has limits. And
okay.
Yeah.
So that's limit number one.
Yes.
Maybe let's have a look at this picture here.
Yeah.
Because this is a picture that we picked is very, very much appropriate to conduct this character study.
Yeah.
We need to explain a little bit more about what we're going to do tonight.
Yeah.
What a character study really is.
Yeah.
But maybe first, what do you see here? This picture, because this is the picture that it ended up becoming.
Yeah.
But we have a photo here of how the photo was taken. What do we see?
I mean, when I look at this picture, I, of course, have this realization that, oh, this is how it's done.
Yeah.
That there is another person on the elephant riding in front of him. And when you see that, or you don't see anybody else in the frame. So I was quite surprised, and I started to look at how difficult the camera person is just somehow holding on to things and like for his life. And David Attenborough is very relaxed.
Yeah, even that elephant seems a bit more working a bit harder. Even.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And he's like graceful and in his kind of natural habitat. And
wearing his iconic blue
shirt. This blue shirt, which this is a blue shirt that I have to share that he really likes to wear this blue, and all his blue shirts are customized with where a lapel mic neatly hides inside.
The microphone you can hide in the label.
Yes, inside the lapel. And so it's really a cottage industry, like his shirts are made by somebody in his house. It's a whole thing. David Attenborough is...
a character.
Yeah, there's more to him than we see.
Yeah.
The other thing that I noticed in this picture, which is also quite ironically hidden behind this camera, is actually there's a leg of a person there. Behind
so it's ironically even hidden in the Bali now behind our camera. So this is a very unlucky leg.
Yes, there is a person in this photograph who is from Thailand, from where this shot was taken, and completely invisible, somehow leaked out of this picture, like wasn't supposed to be seen. And definitely not seen here. So this image, when Keith found this image, and then I looked at it, I was like, wow, this is great, because this image really shows us the kind of the paraphernalia or the background of his work, and we can begin to we can begin to look at it beyond its spectacular nature.
Yeah.
Because it exposes something, in this case, the leg, of course. And maybe I can talk a little bit about character study.
Yes, please.
So I think the framing of character study is really interesting. I'm a theater maker, and theater makers like to do this, that I'm going to play Hamlet or someone, and I then study this character. And part of studying the character is also understanding where this person comes from, what are their childhood traumas, what are the good things that happen to them, because it's not just the lines. There's also more in their life that affects the lines, and then when the actor says those lines, they need to keep that in mind.
Yeah.
And the other thing that also affects performing is where the actor comes from. So both these things play a part in character study. And once you've analyzed the character, you have to take it on the stage and try it out. You have an assumption that, the childhood trauma is there, so this person should look at his friends, or should have this relation with this word. But then you have to take it on the stage and practice it to see if it really works or not, and then come back, analyze again, and then go. So this is
how a character study is done.
Yeah. So it's not an analysis that ends at it. It's also about practicing, and there is a kind of a to and fro between trying out and analyzing, trying out, analyzing. So.
And do you see this to and fro movement in the case of Attenborough as well?
I think the evening today is probably kind of an invitation to do that with his voice.
Yeah.
That today, when we have analyzed this character, next time when we listen to him and we decide to look at nature through his eyes, then we think, but does that part of his character, how does that work in my acting out of David Attenborough?
Yeah.
And looking at nature through his eyes or as him.
So next time we hear his voice in Our Planet 3,
yeah,
then everyone here who has been conducting this character study together with us will have this dialogue before he sees the persona.
Yeah.
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 And why is that so important?
Why is it important to open up his...
why is it important to open up? Or to, for example, also add this picture to this? Why is that such a vital step?
Because there is a politics to his voice.
Yeah.
His voice is very powerful, and it is a specific voice.
Yeah.
And he has a very specific style. He constructs his rhetoric about nature in a very clinical way, methodical way, and he makes choices. And those choices, it's important to understand what he leaves out.
Yeah.
And for that reason, and I think the evening will also unfold some of those things.
Yeah.
And then we can, make our own choices and decisions about that, right?
And so the whole idea would also be to, at some point, ask the audience to give us some extra input for the character study, and to share with us the multitudes that are contained within this David Attenborough. I want to go to, because now we're going to start in diving into the character.
Yeah.
We went into, his date of birth is 1925, so that's before the discovery of DNA, that's before the discovery of the double helix structure, it's also before the Brits ever
India is still a
left
colony.
India, for example. That's just to set the scene of how this century looked ago.
Yeah.
His first gig on television, what was it?
I think 52, so 5 years after India's independence, and he joined BBC. First he tried to be on the radio, and then he got rejected.
Understandably.
Yeah, but he didn't get selected for that.
He has a good radio face, good radio voice.
Yeah, but it didn't. Maybe he had too much of thinking and slurs in his voice for the radio, and at that time things were maybe of another aesthetic quality. But in 52 he made it to the television division, which was an up and coming thing. Television was not a big thing at all.
Yeah, so the technology was also different.
Yeah, and around 56 he makes Zoo Quest.
Zoo Quest.
That's the first nature-related content he makes, and he joins that division of BBC which is related to non-fiction and educational programs.
Yeah.
And for 4 years, he doesn't do anything nature related.
Yeah.
And then he does ZooQuest.
And we're
Something
gonna
like that.
we're gonna watch a little bit of ZooQuest
Yes.
together with the audience, and we're looking at a moment in ZooQuest where because he's literally on a quest to fill up zoos.
Yes, yes.
So he's collecting animals around the world, basically.
Yeah, maybe some of you have heard about ZooQuest. It was a super interesting series, very enterprising also of him to come up with an idea like that. He decided to team up with the person who was the director or the manager of the London Zoo and said that let's go across the world and collect animals for the zoo. And so he made teams. And so one of the missions, I think what we're going to see now is when he's looking for orangutans.
Okay.
He actually maybe even incidentally finds orangutan. He's actually looking for Komodo dragons. Oh. And then while he's going, he collects a few things on the way. Orangutan.
He's looking for Komodo dragons.
Yeah.
He finds an orangutan.
Yeah.
And we're going to have a look.
Yes.
Let's have a look. Yeah, so he was christened Charlie.
Yes. So how he got here is that they landed in Singapore, the zoo, the person from London Zoo and him, and then they slowly started to go towards the Komodo Islands, and they passed by this region on the way to Bali or something, and the person who sells him the orangutan, he introduces him as Dayak people.
Dayak.
Dayak people.
Mm-hmm.
And and tobacco is used to barter. So he's bribing lots of people on his way to carry his stuff, to show orangutans. And just before he finds this one, he actually spots one in the trees with one of the local Dayak people. And there is a shot in this film where he hears a blast, and he looks back, and the Dayak person has a gun, and he has a
Smoking gun. Yeah.
and he's very angry. And this in the video it cuts to the studio where he's sitting. He's really angry and he's very upset. He's saying this was close to murder, and this shouldn't have happened. I tried to explain to him why would you do this, and he said that this orangutan steals my bananas, and like he's a pest and stuff. So I was just doing, and there are many of them.
So the Dayak person answers, we sometimes shoot orangutans because they steal bananas, and it's annoying.
Yeah, but Attenborough was happy that this conversation had prevented this person to follow him and shoot again, so the orangutan was saved. So he was really happy about achieving this in the forest. And he visits the house of the chief, who then guides him to this person, or also there's a lot of tobacco and traded in this process.
Yeah.
The only person named, the only three names we hear in this, we hear David Attenborough, we hear Dan, who is the local British translator, and we hear Charlie. Those are the only three names we hear in this episode.
But not the Dayak people.
No, they're all Dayak people, and they all speak the same language, and so there are many historical inaccuracies around that. But let's forgive him for that, because he went all the way, and
he went all the way to
get Charlie to the London Zoo, and so that everybody could see
Charlie,
amazing Charlie, and how much effort had been made, because going to Singapore with all of this heavy equipment. Yeah. And it's not easy to go into these jungles.
ZooQuest is not easy.
Yes.
No.
And Charlie was then healthy and had a child whom he had the honor of naming, again, BB or something it's called. Yeah.
So what I hear in this is that he'd sort of rather take Charlie out of the environment that he is in which he's sort of mingled with humans, and they have certain relationships with one another.
Yeah.
They even are aggressive to one another, or they steal and they kill.
Yeah.
But rather he take him out of that situation and create a new fiction for Charlie in a zoo in London.
Yeah.
And then that is more
and
peaceful.
he makes another orangutan series which premiered in 2024.
Yeah.
And in that series, you don't see the Dayak people. All the orangutans, 200 of them are left now, and maybe 6 of them in the London Zoo. And Dayak people are not allowed in the area where the orangutans are now living, because it's a nature reserve financed by Max Planck Institute and so on and so forth.
Yeah. So the Dayak people are not in the...
No, they're not. It's not. There is a no entry without permission, and
only with the camera
of an orangutan. Yeah, and he can go there with his crew, and now also drones and cameras that can look at orangutans from the canopy above. So the zoo has somewhat become the nature reserve. Yeah, that's the transformation, I think.
So the zoo has become the nature reserve. So there's two created spaces now where the orangutans live.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And do you see David Attenborough as part of this, as part of a fiction in that sense, or what does it tell you?
I think that single species conservation is a form of fiction. That because thanks to ZooQuest, we can now see how the Dayak people and orangutans were living together. Yeah. But now we have a scenario where only orangutans need to live in this evergreen forest, and they can only be conserved if it's untouched by humans.
Yeah. Yeah.
And and this is a form of fiction, or
Yeah.
this requires a lot of orchestration, staging of some kind, fencing, lights, all
Building a
kinds of-
stage,
Yes.
almost like the Perosha bird.
Yeah,
Yeah. Cleaning the.
cleaning
Yeah.
and yeah.
Yeah, I see. We did also have another clip, but I want to save that one maybe for later on in the evening.
Yeah.
Because I think I want to meet the other speakers sooner.
Yes.
But before we continue, are you also a fan? Because we're gonna talk about the narrative strength of David Attenborough and his use of language and the way he tells a story. And do you admire that in David Attenborough, his ability to tell a story?
As a student of theater, I do. I've spent a lot of time with collaborators analyzing his style. And after we've become more and more aware of climate change, there is a homogeneous template to almost all of his documentaries. He will give a kind of a summarizing title. Two men with curly hair. How will the night turn out to be?
Are you talking about us?
Yes,
now?
suppose something like that.
I was like,
so
did
it'll
he-
be a kind of a framing device for the whole thing, and then there will be a description of the location. And an evening. This is a regular evening at the Bali. A lot of guests are wearing their best
It's a
clothes
full
and are
house,
sitting in the audience.
as always.
Yes. And then he will introduce the conflict that Agat has never been at the Bali before. Wonder if he's nervous. And so this kind of a...
He's
will he
cleaning
be
his-
able to calm his nerves when Keith asks him difficult questions? And the two guests are from another perspective. Only the night will tell what will unfold. This kind of thing. And then there will be like some long shots, some close-ups, and
Yeah.
there will be a time for that. And
We zoom out on the Leidseplein perhaps a little bit.
and then a time lapse of this whole conversation,
Yeah.
where maybe somebody gets into a fight,
Yeah.
so some action that can be defined. That was this a moment where brotherhood was found, or parenting situation happened, or very kind of urban and familial metaphors and tropes. And then there will be a conclusion that in the end, everybody had a great time.
And we learned something.
And until the next evening at the Bali.
Yeah.
Da-da-da. So, and this template is all the Netflix films, you can observe this template.
Yeah, and I even saw you on your laptop at some point with an Excel sheet
Yeah.
that you actually analyzed all the
Yeah. So I worked...
phrases that he makes.
Yeah, I worked with Julia, who's here in the audience, and Naomi and George, they are not right now here in the audience. And we looked at a lot of their scripts, and we made this very rudimentary Excel sheet of how he divides his scenes, and we saw parallels and came up with this structure.
Yeah.
And now I started to work with Morgan, who's also here. We're trying to see all of his 500 of his things, and trying to transcribe the films and to do a very systematic and mathematical analysis of
His linguistics.
Yeah, that how has his opinion about the orangutan changed in 40 years, 50 years? How has his opinion about Dayak people changed
Yeah.
about himself? How often did he use the word extraordinary or spectacular?
Let me guess.
Yeah,
Often.
often.
Yeah.
And science. What 5 words before science did he use, and what 5 words after science did he use? And how has that shifted?
And then at some point you have the the character study plus, because you have this,
Yeah,
plus the sort of the mathematical model of his linguistics.
yeah.
And then?
And then, I mean, I'm only doing this honestly, just to save myself.
Yeah.
Because I can totally understand that the love for Attenborough is wild. You know, like people, strong. And
Yeah.
it's really like, people feel very strongly about it. And I feel responsible that what my intuition is telling me, what I've observed at a cursory level. I need to do this more systematically
Yeah.
and understand what kind of stories we have told about nature,
Yeah.
and how should we shift them in order to make
Yeah. So if
something
you
else.
know what the dominant stories are of nature, then you also know what's not been told.
Yeah,
Okay. Yeah.
yeah.
I see. And to answer in a yes or no question, are you a fan?
I have mixed feelings.
Okay. Never
Yeah.
do the yes or no questions. Are you guys fans? Can I see some hands? Maybe. Yeah, I am a fan. I'm very excited to continue this character study. I'm very keen on exploring the evening with you further, and I'm really coming towards you at some point with the microphone. But I'm also keen to invite more people to the stage. First, we're going to listen to Gemma Venhuizen. She's going to hold a column about, for a big part, the story strength, the narrative strength of Sir David. And Gemma, to introduce her, probably is a biologist, geologist turned science journalist. Works for NRC Handelsblad. Her voice is also pretty famous, by the way, because it's heard every week, I think, at Onbehaarde Apen. A very admirable podcast. And she also wrote a book about Darwin's contemporaries, overlooked female scientists from the age of Darwin. And I thought it was nice to mention as well. And afterwards, we're going to talk with Gemma and with Frank Westerman, who is a writer who's sitting there. So after Gemma is finished, I invite you both to come here. But for now, give a warm applause to Gemma Venhuizen.
Agathe, after your very interesting talk, now everyone is waiting for the fight to happen later on, but not yet, I guess.
The stage has been set.
Unless maybe someone very much disagrees with what I'm going to say now. If you ever feel rejected, please think of Sir David Attenborough. Nowadays, we might know him as the greatest voice of all time, but in his 20s, like we heard from Agathe, applying for a radio job at the BBC, they turned him down. No one was that much impressed by his smooth, deep voice or by his looks. They did offer him a television job, but at first only behind the scenes because his teeth were considered too big. Of course, it is a story with a happy end. Eventually, in 1952, as we have heard, at the age of 26, the zoologist and geologist from Cambridge was allowed to present his first TV program that was not yet ZooQuest, but Animal Patterns. And 2 years after that, he was allowed to travel around the world for ZooQuest. And this capturing of rare animals in the wild was back then still an acceptable phenomenon. Later, in the 60s, he shortly worked as a producer again behind the scenes. And for example, it's thanks to him that the famous Monty Python comedy series were seen on TV, and also that snooker tournaments were shown. And probably he was a big fan of snooker. However, luckily for us, he went back to presenting again. And, well, the rest is history. Sir David Attenborough, who will turn 99 this year. Kees, I think you said he was from 25, but I think he's from 26. Anyway, he's quite.
My head is 100 years old.
Yeah, almost. We will round it up to 100. And he also made more than 100 nature documentaries. Some of them were individual programs, other were famous television series like Planet Earth. And although these documentaries are known for their beautiful images and their spectacular scenes, above all, they are known for Attenborough's voice and his storytelling. He once said in an interview, "The point is not to make a sentence longer or shorter than necessary, and to leave out all unnecessary adjectives and comparisons." So basically, you just had to make the sentence the right length and to skip all the extras. He tried to avoid anthropomorphism, the tendency to attribute human qualities to animals, and in his own words, he was not an animal lover. Being an animal lover means having an exaggerated sentiment that is close to anthropomorphism, he said. I don't like worms or spiders, but they are fascinating and interesting. They give me intellectual and aesthetic pleasure, but that is different from animal love. Anyone who watches Sir David's many nature series will also notice the changes in technology from black and white to high definition and from infrared to high-speed cameras. He himself said in a documentary about his life, I really experienced the golden age of nature film. Almost every year we found new ways to reveal aspects of the natural world. And he's the only winner of the BAFTA Awards, the famous British Film and Television Awards, who won them both for programs in black and white, in color, in high definition, and in 3D. And although the audience is in love with him, or well, many of us are, some fellow biologists are critical of his approach because in recent years it became clear that the BBC did not shy away from staging. Well, we already talked a bit about that. For example, the birth of a polar bear here in the Netherlands in Ouwehands Zoo. Well, it was staged, and Attenborough, he said matter-of-factly, well, if we had placed the camera in a polar bear den in the wild, then the mother would have killed either her cubs or the cameraman. So, well, he defended the choice. As for myself, being a biology journalist, I've always been a fan of his work, and in science communication, it is a well-known fact that no one will read your article or watch your documentary if you only try to share information, to share the bare facts. First, you have to make people feel engaged with the topic, and Sir David is a star in doing that. He can make you even fall in love with weird, dangerous, ugly species. And I think now it's a good time to show a picture from the fungi cordyceps that can take over the brains of ants and other animals and turn them into zombies.
Yeah, so there's a... Yeah, the one.
Yeah, that's the one.
They're not even moving. They're dead.
Yeah, they're supposed to start moving at some point, I guess. Otherwise, I will keep on talking until they move some more.
Niels, are the ants going to move, you think?
Oh, they're not going to move. Oh, okay. We were waiting for... Okay. Anyway, I'm sorry you have to miss his voice, but these ants were supposed to move in a zombie-like way because the fungus has taken over their brains and they do whatever it commands them. So in the end, they climb up a tree and they bite in a branch, and then there's spores of the fungi coming out of their head and raining down on other ants on the forest floor who are also infected and also start to behave like a fungus. And, well, the poor ants die in the end, but the fungus survives. And, well, I saw this clip some 20 years ago, and I've always remembered it. I could advise you to look it up. And I think I'm not the only one inspired by it, because recently there was this very huge, very successful TV series, The Last of Us, centering around a zombie fungus storyline. And I wouldn't be surprised if the writers also were inspired by Sir David. 10 years ago, I was so intrigued by this nature filming that I decided to have a go at it myself. I took a course in South Africa and made a mini documentary, The Beetle and the Beasts. And I hope that one has some moving images in it. So maybe we could see a short clip of it.
This is Scotia, a piece of paradise in South Africa.
Anyway, the story continues about Dave on his quest to find love. But, well, like you can see, I'm still far away off from the BBC level. But maybe you could also see that I had some inspiration. First of all, the music, the epic music. We heard it before when we saw this beautiful bird dancing, that Sir David also uses the musical elements. And also, I asked one of my fellow course takers, the one with the best Attenborough-like voice, to start telling the voiceover. And I had a few other, kind of take-home messages about nature filming while taking the course, and I will share them with you now. And I think they also, we will look to Agathe for that, but I think they all are also applicable on, for example, planet Earth. First of all, know your protagonist, know where they live, eat, and poop, and know what you want to tell with your story. Look for the stories that have not yet been told. Visualize unusual behavior. And if you do capture a rare bird, for example, that's very nice in itself, but, like Agathe was saying, some action is needed. If that bird doesn't swim or find a mate or gets eaten, then you don't have a story. A good example, I think, is the lyrebird that was filmed by Sir David and his crew. This bird is a phenomenal imitator and could imitate, for example, other birds, but also human sounds like the click of a camera. And I think we either have a short movie clip from that bird or another picture.
I'm confident about the lyrebird.
I think the next one. Anyway, I will say the lyrebird, it also can imitate a chainsaw. And that is in itself a perfect and tragic short story, because it implies that this bird is witnessing the disappearance of the forest where it's living. Okay, we have at least a picture. Now let's see. No? Okay. Anyway, look up the lyrebird for yourself, please. I could really recommend it, because then you hear how he imitates not only the camera but also the chainsaw, and how tragic the story is. Another lesson about nature filming that I learned is to be patient, because nature simply cannot be directed. Maybe up to a certain point if you look over there. And sometimes it takes hours before you get the perfect picture. And I think also the BBC filmers experience that. Sometimes it looks like they fall from one amazing scene into the next, but of course there's also a lot of research being done. And last but not least, leave your deodorant at home. A few years ago, Sir David revealed that he never wears aftershave or deodorant because unfamiliar smells could keep away the animals. He said, your job when you're in those circumstances is to be invisible and for the animal to be unaware of your presence. So if you've got something pretty, well, smelly on your armpits, it would interfere with the tranquility of the surroundings. I could go on for hours about other wise things that he says, but for now I think we should continue this talk together with Agathe, Frank and Kees, and with the voice of Sir David himself, of course. And let's just hope that he will stay with us for many more years and that he is not like some animals that he filmed in the past, the last of his kind. Thank you.
And while we're clapping, let's also clap for Frank Westerman. Yeah. Okay, so no moving images of the cordyceps and the lyrebird. So we all have to remember that when this evening is over, we go home at some point and then we look at the lyrebird and the cordyceps. The cordyceps you explained very well, and that was, you also did it super. Yeah, it was also uncanny, the image of the fungus growing out of the ant's head. But the lyrebird is he does his impressions so well of the forest surroundings that he even imitates the camera that he is being filmed with.
Exactly, yeah. And the chainsaw that is cutting down the tree in which he is singing.
Yeah. So the bird acknowledges something that the BBC crew is not even filming. It acknowledges the destruction of the forest.
Yeah. So probably the camera clicks, maybe they are from the BBC crew themselves.
Yeah.
And then the destruction of the forest, of course, that it is an ongoing thing that you can idealize the nature and this beautiful unspoiled forest, but maybe it's only unspoiled for that very moment.
Yeah, and that very patch.
And if they would come back a few weeks later, that patch of forest wouldn't be there anymore.
Yeah, so it's quite a prophet, that lyrebird, telling the crew, sort of communicating to the crew, guys, this forest is not as pristine as you may show it to be.
No, and of course, by including that scene in which it imitates a chainsaw, they also tell something about, okay, this is going on.
Yeah.
They do have some awareness.
Exactly.
But I think this has, well, I was actually quite shocked by ZooQuest. Not only the change in his voice, because he, of course, had
very
a higher
high voice,
but also the awareness, like, okay, maybe it's not a very good thing to keep the animals out of their natural surroundings just for our own amusement.
The cage.
For our own
in the
zoos.
small,
So later, with the lyrebird, that's an example of how he invites the duality a little bit more into the into the scene.
A little bit more, at least.
Yeah, and I have this very funny image now in my head that if the lyrebird is such a good imitator, there might be one lyrebird out there that has David Attenborough's voice now.
That would be very. Maybe we could invite that lyrebird for our next session here.
There's a lyrebird out there who's like, here is a lyrebird. Oh,
Extraordinary.
I did it anyway. Frank, welcome. Frank, I already introduced you as a writer of many books. Many of those works have been translated into many different languages, human languages. The first book that I read from you was The Graanrepubliek. And the latest book that I read from you was this one, 7 dieren bijten terug, or 7 animals bite back. A modern bestiary, in the sense that it is definitely about stories about animals, and in a certain sense they have a mirror for us. Do I say this correctly?
Yeah, I think a bestiary is always like it's from the Middle Ages. The bestiary, it's a book about beasts, but it's always allegoric. So it tells stories, wink, wink, it's about us.
Yeah.
Like the fable.
Like the
fables.
The fables.
But the fable are more, the fable, I think all fables are about humans.
Yeah, like so Van den Vosreinaarde, for example.
Yeah. It's very much about, and I think that's fascinating. But now, if we look at nature documentaries and wildlife, well, these kind of formats, I take it from the perspective of language, and which surprises me first is, of course, it's English.
Yeah.
And it's better English than we speak here all together. So that's a choice. It colors what you see. I think it's more fundamental. We've named an elephant, and it has become an elephant.
Yeah.
Because we refer to it. A zebra is different. En een hankbuikzwijntje,
Yeah.
the pig, an ugly one, I mean, they have different names. So we look at it differently because we have different names.
Yeah.
I'm not talking about the music. Makes you, I mean, I'm being swept away.
When you watch BBC, the BBC.
The beautiful dance of the birds and things like that, I'm swept away. But at the same time, wow, we are the ventriloquists of nature. The buikspreker.
So a buikspreker, yeah.
And we are the children of our times, like David Attenborough. And what Agatha, which I really would like to know from you, which you might know it or not, has David Attenborough ever reflected on the fact that he made Zoo Quest and he went out for caging and bringing home the orangutan, and then in 2024 he went back? But did he reflect on the different perspectives of looking at nature?
I'm sure he reflects about it for sure, but I haven't seen it.
Yeah.
But there's so much of him. I've nearly not seen enough. So,
but during a lifetime,
yeah,
a theatre maker, you look also for change.
Yeah.
So far, he seems to me as a consequent character, a flat character, but you might say,
without an arc.
But where are the twists in his career or in his life or the way he looks at? He has become an activist for climate, for climate change,
against climate, for climate action,
for climate action.
Yeah.
What were the twists?
So how does that arc in his character? Where does it come from? Agathe?
I think it comes from the change in media formats.
Yeah,
he's very successful. He
was invited to do Netflix.
So that is something that changed. At some point, he started to work with private producers and not with BBC. And
what about age? He's become so old. He's worried. He's nothing to lose. So he can say whatever he wants. He is the authority.
No, he cannot say whatever he wants.
Oh no.
But he's the face of the estate of David Attenborough.
But if you are young, you choose your words carefully because you built your career, and now he's more free.
Yeah, I think he's choosing his. Yeah, I think he's choosing his words carefully now, but he's more confident of his choices. He's really what survives of David Attenborough is the fittest for the television. So the fittest for the television is what has
Darwinism
survived.
But then on David Attenborough.
Yes, and so he's a big Darwin fan, and I think he really wants to be in this canon. Yeah, goes back to Galapagos Islands a couple of times, and
and television is his niche, so to speak.
Television is his area of work, and we see actually in Zoo Quest some very candid moments, very free mistakes. A lot of things we would categorize now as mistakes, and a certain kind of romance. This close-up shot of the hand holding with the orangutan.
Yeah.
And
beautiful. The clips reminded me, and the work of David Attenborough. I spoke to Gemma just over dinner tonight about it. What comes to my mind was like we have a famous filmmaker called Joris Ivens, and he made films in the name of the proletariat, how nature was conquered. Very famously, he documented the Afsluitdijk, the closing off of the South Sea in the Netherlands.
Yeah.
And he choreographed the images. It's non-fiction. It's documentary. And at the same time, with the music and the narrative, it's like how to silence brutal nature, the voice of nature, and how to conquer it.
So the story of Joris Ivens is how to conquer nature.
Yes, and how to subdue it, and that never again
So
the
no- sort of-
Netherlands shall be flooded.
Yeah.
And we fight against nature, and that it was a leftist, progressive narrative. And so I think, I mean, winds are changing in the world again. The narrative of David Attenborough doesn't necessarily last forever. It's not the definite, but he has set a standard, hasn't he?
Sure.
Yeah.
And I think the examples of the example you use now and David Attenborough and the others we know, I think that there are two things. One is encountering nature, and it's quite different to speak about it. You can encounter nature and don't have the compulsion to speak about it. You could understand it and explain it, or you could silence it, or you could just embody it. And there could be different ways in which you could deal with nature. And Attenborough, for example, decides to explain it.
Yeah.
Decides to understand it completely, explain it, and communicate it.
And the
in
rules
a-
that Gemma outlined are the rules like you pick a character, you pick a certain arc, and in that way you can explain something through the
Yeah.
story. You can make
But
sort of a
the explaining,
didactic.
it's much more than explaining. He adds,
Yeah.
he adds the romance,
Yeah.
or the beauty, or the aesthetics, whatever you want.
Gemma?
And I think there is a political narrative as well. I mean,
Yeah.
Yeah, but this is right now. Like, for example, last November, there was a big biodiversity conference in Colombia, and people are really struggling at the moment. Like, how do we see ourselves compared to nature? Because over the last centuries, especially the Western nature view is a bit like living from nature. Nature has to benefit us, so to say. Whereas now there's much more indigenous voices also invited to these biodiversity conferences, and then it's all about living in nature or living with nature, and that really, like you say, first nature was seen as a kind of enemy to be conquered, and now it has something to be
We
admired.
battle the
but it's
water
still-
wolf.
But in the end, it would be great if we would learn to see nature as something that we are part of, and that it's not like against or like looking at it from a distance, but we are in nature. And
but does that require a different narrative?
well, the good thing about maybe what is it, Edinburgh's inheritage, is that a word, like erfenis?
Yeah.
A legacy.
Yeah, legacy, yeah. That nowadays I feel like nature filmers and nature documentary makers, they build upon what he has been doing, so they admire. Well, think of Freek Vonk, the Dutch biologist,
With a bit of Steve Irwin in the mix.
yeah. But what I like about his work, for example, and is that he really appeals to young kids. And when we talk about saving nature, we say kids have to be aware of nature. First, you have to know something before you feel you want to protect it, and it's good that they arouse some feelings. But then at the same time, I think there's also a tendency to be a bit more activism. We had like a film about the North Sea. What was it again?
The Wilde Noordzee.
The wild North Sea. And then you also saw the filmmaker, but he was saying he was actually commenting on the way the fisheries work, etc. And he was saying like, well, I'm not sure if I want to eat fish anymore. Now I see this, and that's a step further than Sir David takes it. For
We have Al Gore and the
an inconvenient.
And I wonder because
inconvenient truth. I mean, which is activism as well.
Yeah.
For a good cause, I think. But it is activism. But can we escape? Like, I mean,
I wonder.
You mentioned that choose your protagonist. Wow, that's also intervention. Of course, I mean, Freek Vonk is having every documentary has a protagonist. I mean, it's him, but also the animal he portrays.
Yeah.
So is there a way to avoid? I mean, in the discussion before, we talked about Amitav Ghosh and his statements that.
So a British Indian writer who.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think you referred to him as well. That do we have the imagination? Do we lack the imagination to see climate change, like and all its consequences coming towards us, or do we need another, less Western maybe narrative? I have my doubt, but I think this is we're looking for this narrative. This narrative.
And are you, because from your question, I also get the idea that you're saying whether it's an allegory, whether it's a metaphor, whether it's a Disney film, or whether it's a Netflix film by David Attenborough, the moment you turn an animal or a part of nature into a character, you are intervening. And is that part of the issue?
Maybe it's there's no way to escape from that. I'm afraid it's very difficult to find this other narrative. But what we have been doing is like interpreting and speaking, like the ventriloquists.
And what do you do in your book? Because I suppose that if you see this, you want to avoid it yourself.
There's only one chapter in which I try to ask the question, like, to what extent can we imagine, like the polar bear, I took the polar bear, the world seen through the eyes of the polar bear. We have empathy and we have imagination. So we, as human beings, we can imagine how it was when we were little, when we were children, because we have been children, we have been little. So, but it's hard if you try to think about how was it when I was little. How did the world look like? How did I really literally look up? It's very hard to imagine. So now the other human being, it's very hard to imagine. We have difficulty with empathy. The whole world is suffering a crisis of empathy, I'm afraid. But then, can we imagine the world seen through the eyes of the polar bear?
Of the polar bear.
And
you tried?
I tried. Yes, I tried. Yeah, I went to. I saw one and whatever. But I'm afraid it's very limited. What you really can, and then if you're very honest, a male polar bear roaming solitary the rims of whatever the rocks, the Svalbard Peninsula. He's either hungry or he wants to fuck. So that's about the two things that makes him tick. So why I haven't seen the documentary saying this is a male polar bear. He's hungry. He's asking himself,
will there be a mate there?
Yeah.
Oh yeah. Will there be some food there?
Or yeah.
Yeah.
So there is a problem in trying to imagine the world. I spoke to scientists as well, and there was a famous polar bear because she featured in the documentary. So she was called Frost. That was the name. And then when I asked the Norwegian scientist, to comment on it, he said, the individual you call Frost, and I refer to as number 2239 in our database.
Frost is actually called number 2239.
Yeah. And so from a scientific perspective, he didn't want even to use like the nickname or the name that we've given, which is a pure stance.
But it's interesting because nowadays I don't know how you think about Agathe, because you mentioned something about the single species view.
Yeah.
Because of course, nature. Well, you're looking at an ecosystem, and it's true. It's all about relationship between species, but at the same time, it makes it more abstract or more distant if you talk about these terms like biodiversity. So then a character could help. But from a theater point of view, would you advise to use a character? Or?
I think that I would, and maybe this is too soon in the evening already, but I think that there is more to this than naming characters. I think there's there's a lot of power in embodiment, in becoming polar bear, and not naming the polar bear or thinking like one. And this is maybe too strange for scientists to think of becoming squirrel, becoming polar bear. But for an actor, it's something, or dancer, and something that has been done for a long time, not new. And it's fearing from being human, that humans will touch nature and destroy it, but also anthropomorphing is not good. Pure animals are animals. I think finding our place in there is somewhere a solution, or some direction that I find more, which you were also mentioning, that now it's about living with and not, and embodying and not representing.
Yeah.
That is the...
And where do we sit in the character study now? Because David Attenborough is part of, like you said, both that movement. He speaks to the UN. He speaks to the biodiversity conference. He says, change your value system. We need to tackle the narratives. He's partly that persona, but he's also, like you said, one of the driving forces behind creating the issues at hand. Part of that system.
My opinion on this is that who will not now come on a mic and say, let's save the planet? If we are allowing, that if David Attenborough does this, and we say, okay, he is now a climate activist. But then we can go much further. We can ask, what is his solution? What is he proposing? One of the things he says is that we are too many. That's something that he's said in his Netflix documentary and several other places. But where are we too many? I mean, in which continent, which part of the world?
India,
Global South, and so on and so forth. So we have to, maybe now is the time to go a bit deeper into asking that, yes, nothing new. We know we have to save the earth now or never. But how? Tell us. And ask a few more questions after that.
Yeah. And if anything we've learned, and Frank, you have studied this in your book, the power of the allegory, the power of the animal as a metaphor. You have learned it firsthand that the animal is a much better storyteller or story carrier probably than the rest of us. But what types of stories then should we now make, now that we've known this about, let's say, the protagonist of the ex-protagonist of the nature story? What do you see now as our challenge? Can we work with animals or nature, or what do you think? Where are you in your study of that?
I think that
is this the part where we have the conflict?
Actually, a lot has been said, and there's so many interesting things we are saying. I think the Amitav Ghosh refers to the Bon Bibi story a lot, and I think it has now become relatable in Netherlands because of the wolf.
So the Bon Bibi story is about a tiger in a forest.
It's about man-eater tigers in Sundarbans.
Big prosaic or epic story.
Yeah, it's a story it's an epic told in many versions around the Sundarbans, let's say that. And there's a moment in the story. So Sundarbans is mangroves. So you cannot put a camera there, which you can't get wide shots in Sundarbans. So the tiger might be right here, and you wouldn't know.
Because the forest simply does not allow for wide shots.
Yes, and it's just, mangroves are like just very, very naughty kind of, like, the word, naughty. But
but mangroves are
really
everywhere.
Thick,
let's just say,
really thick root
all over the place.
Structures and very convoluted, and the tiger camouflages really well. And it's difficult to run through and stuff, and
or sit on an elephant and walk through.
Yeah. So that the tiger could be in this room, for example, and we wouldn't know. And there is a moment in the story where you come eye to eye with the tiger, and at that point, if you are able to conjure up a prayer in a specific poetic rhythm, the poem will get wings and will fly to the right god and that will come to your rescue and save you. Now, this is it's a funny story, of course. But the way it is constructed is very interesting because it does a few things. One, it tells us this awareness of animals around us all the time, which we think is quite exceptional, but maybe in Sundarbans it's not. And now with the wolf, maybe in Netherlands we have to get used to this, that it could be in Amstel Park or wherever. But and the other thing is this difference that we shift to poetry, a different way of doing language in order to meet this beast-animal situation. So there's something there that I feel is a hint. He also talks, Amitav Ghosh also talks a lot about recognizing. So the lack of imagination is not something more than, so we have less imagination and we need to do more. I don't think that's what he's saying. What he's referring to is that we need to recognize that the river has the potential, the sea has the potential to flood Amsterdam.
Yeah.
And when we look at the dunes, we see the sea from the Ice Age. And we recognize that, oh, this was sea. And this is the lack of imagination, that we don't think of nature. When we see nature, we are not able to see its potential.
And so where David Attenborough would try and understand and narrate the sea, the goal here is to recognize it.
Yeah. I'm afraid that many of the templates that we know are repeating themselves over time and also geographically. And I've tried to analyze a story about a narwhal tusk. It's a dolphin with a beautiful
long tusk,
the unicorn type tusk. I've tried to analyze it in I don't know if you know Vladimir Prop. It's the literature scientist who detected in Russian and Scandinavian fairy tales 30, up to 60 fixed elements that reoccur, and I've applied it to a real-time story, a terrorist attack on the London Bridge in which a narwhal tusk figure played a part, and it's amazing. Even our behavior unfolds according to the elements that Vladimir Prop in 1929 formulated in St. Petersburg. But then again, the Greek tragedies, the Shakespearean stories. If you look at America today, it's a good format to analyze what's going on.
Yeah.
And lack of imagination. I was the other day. I just came back and I was watching in an airplane again the Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxies, in which white mice experiment on us. So we have a lot of imagination. And we have the capacity, and there's cli-fi, there is climate fiction stories that are very scary. The apocalypse is a reoccurring.
There is Blade Runner. There is
Blade.
So do we need a bit more of fiction to understand real life, maybe? Because if we look at it from a scientist non-fiction perspective, we are very within the box. And if you apply this out of the box thinking, maybe it's needed. Amitav Ghosh, of course, is writer from both non-fiction and fiction, so maybe he can make that switch easy.
Yeah.
By the way, there's the Dutch writer and explorer Arita Bayens. He just published a book about a dialogue with the North Sea. So then the sea is participating in this dialogue about how it will maybe...
and it's actually talking, the sea.
Yeah, exactly.
And waving. I'm going to leave you. But I'm going to go to the audience and try and bring it back to Sir David Attenborough and see if we can get some extra input for the character study. And then in the end, I want to see if we can take some things together, what we've learned from David, but also from fables, allegories, story templates, Shakespeare, Cli-Fi, Arita Bayens, and see where this might leave us. But I was wondering, because I spoke to you beforehand on the evening, and you said, I hope I get to both enjoy and love and admire David Attenborough, but also be very critical. I was wondering, how are we doing so far?
Yeah, well, thank you. Well, I thought how you really see David Attenborough. Was he just good in a range of other nature filmers, or because of his voice and because he had so much money to make his films? Or was he also in communication with his time? Because you mentioned that he was not using anthropomorphism in his films.
Or avoiding it?
Avoiding it.
Yeah.
And I think that is really a lack of knowledge. Because if you look at a lot of biologists now, like Frans de Waal, they say, how can you not think of other animals like us? So I wondered how much he took up on that, how much he was in tune with his time, and how much, or was he just, I mean, hunters
Is
also...
he's like, we're talking as if he was, but he is obviously.
Yeah. And, I mean, hunters also are nature protectors because they want to hunt. Do you see David Attenborough as such a person? I don't think so, that he wants to protect nature because he is just interested in it. I wondered how you see his emotional relationship with it also.
Yeah. Was a question for Agathe a little bit, or just for the table? Is there anyone else who has a question at this point? Sir. I was almost going to say Sir David, but
All right.
I don't know what your name is.
That's okay. I'm Frank also. In terms of the voice,
Yes.
can the argument be made that he became his own caricature?
In what sense?
Exactly in the sense that I said.
Okay. So did David Attenborough turn himself into a character? Or just what you said, actually? Yeah. Yeah.
Like Werner Herzog.
Like Werner Herzog, another natural documentary maker.
Yeah.
Well, table?
I think, actually, maybe now I think of it, maybe I will come back to your question as well later. But his voice might also be a limitation in it. He is kind of maybe captured by, we were talking before, like how on the one hand maybe he can speak more freely because he's older, etc., etc. But also he has his own brand. He has
Everyone will
something
listen
to
if he
lose
speaks.
now. So he has to be very careful not to lose that image. And the voice is so central to this. For example, if he would have a throat ache or like have a very squeaky voice all of a sudden.
Or his old voice from back then.
Yeah. People are like, "Are you an imposter?" Or what? And we also expect this voice to tell a certain kind of story. So if all of a sudden he would become very activist or so, everyone would be shocked.
The authority stands or falls with the
so
with the voice.
I think indeed maybe he is, well, on the one hand a character, but on the other hand a caricature. What is it?
And I'm also wondering, because Agathe, you made him say a lot of things in his own voice using the artificial intelligence tools. But if you let him say something that is totally out of character, but in his voice, does that still work, or do you immediately see
very
David?
offensive, for example?
Does he drop away? What do you think?
It doesn't immediately drop away. Like we made him say, "This wild, let's
get
become
wilder."
wild again,"
Yeah.
and we'll hear a bit where he says, "I'm scared," and he's never said that, or that I am. I don't know what I'm looking at. I think immediately we will not recognize that that it's not in line with his character. But I doubt if he would never say that.
Wow.
Yeah.
But the moment, for example, David Attenborough would walk into the Sundarbans, from the Bon Bibi story, then he would maybe say, I don't know about this environment.
I think his voice is a construction. It's it's artificial and
That's the trap.
Yeah.
That's exactly the trap. He's become his own caricature.
Yeah, and his voice is the result of TRP ratings, post-production techniques, his legacy, his own, and all of that. So his voice is not as simple as my voice or your voice. It's a lot of money, and it is an imitation of some kind of.
It's like the hands of a pianist or something.
Yeah.
Oh, you do have a loud voice, but I'll bring the microphone to you.
Nobody's ever told me that I need a microphone, but okay. I would argue because of it, it devalues actually his voice. His voice devalues his message. Because it's always the same voice.
Yeah, it might be distracting.
That it devalues the message.
Sure, and if his message is, if he go beyond never been seen before or extraordinary, spectacular, and his license to do all of this is for curiosity, but what is the message that you see a film, and suppose children see the dancing bird, how do you plot them saving the earth from that point onwards? They will never see this bird in their life, because this itself is a form of fiction. The framing and the editing and lighting, all of that. Nature is not directable, but it's editable. So it's this specific moments in the sound and all of that.
Yeah, it's also what Jet was saying about the anthropomorphism and
Yeah.
how, in a way, Frans de Waal, you know him. He passed away last year, but he was a very famous primatologist. And he was looking at animals like more of akin to us, because of course also this narrative, it can either help you to befriend the species or to alienate from it.
Yeah.
There was one question over here.
Thank you so much for this evening and for this conversation. I think it's very enriching, very insightful. So I have a question, just to respond on your intro about studying the bird and this actually being a mirror. Mm-hmm. And then I have a question about the character study, which is also kind of like an opportunity to study our own character. Mm-hmm. I was very much struck by the description or the interpretation of the image that described as a moment of romance between in the zoo quest of the hand with the monkey, and this being interpreted as romance, because for me I'm just okay, so what kind of romance are you interpreting it as? And then this moment being kind of like a micro allegory, because for me it was super brutal, this touching the hand, and also the narration of I was feeding this monkey, and then slowly there was some softening of. Yeah. So for me, the question at the table, and maybe specifically for Agathe, because you described it as romance. So I'm just what kind of romance are we talking about?
And was that micro moment a bit of the mirror that we're looking for?
Yeah. For me, it's if Attenborough uses all these different elements, and one of the elements is romance, and then that specific moment interpreted as romance, then I'm okay, so what does this say in a character study about the character of, in this case, of Agathe?
Great question. It's a question for you, Agathe.
Yeah. I think that what Attenborough what he loves is violence. He has a big penchant for violence. He has an unlimited appetite for violence, and he loves to shoot it. He has, in some sense, he doesn't see that taking these animals away, taking cameras into having a drone flying in front of the orangutan, and then naming it a mother, and with this intrusive technology, capturing the mother and child in the intimate setting and humanizing that. This is extremely violent, and it's not so naive. And so he composes a shot of the hand, and he projects himself as the person who's saving this orangutan from the person who's captured it. And so this love of this relationship of now you will stay captured in my zoo, and I named you, I christened you, that's what he uses. There's a lot of Christian metaphors in this whole story about soul and savagery, and so this is that violence, this is that romance and obsession.
It's kind of a very ancient view of this romantic period in, what was it, 1900 or so, that people also saw the wilderness as something.
It's like a sort of a Cartesian duality, like Descartes.
So you on the one hand you kind of feel like you are the savior from this wilderness. And in that way, he also told himself probably a story in order to justify what they were doing there. Because now we say, okay, maybe 70 years ago it was still okay to go in the zoo and look for animals to capture and bring them back. But maybe there was also already a bit of a tension between that. And by maybe for himself making him the romantic hero to feed this animal and to help this animal, he and
with his own image, the love with how he saw himself as the person who's doing all of this. It's
a good mirror then.
I was going to ask what do we now, because I'm going to move towards the conclusion of the evening, but what then is that mirror that we described in the introduction?
Well, animals expose us to our shortcomings, and we have many.
Plenty. And for when I talk about Sir David, and I do really like him and admire him on the one hand, but I think he must also be a bit vain and a bit I don't know. I think he also thinks highly of himself. Which is not per se maybe a bad characteristic.
Maybe he's also addicted to the violence within him, between the different powers within him. That would really make him.
But at the other hand, the species, us, we are very destructive, but also creative, and this is also creation.
Yeah, for sure.
I want to say that there is probably not one mirror possible, and that's also the difficulty that I find in answering the question quite in a way that what should we do with narratives, what should we do is, I don't think one mirror for the we or for the whole society it's not, it doesn't work, and there are probably multiple mirrors for different parts of the society needed. Then we are able to see something.
Very funny. I was visiting the Chinese gene bank, and in China they have thousands of characters, but they were telling us that we only need 4 letters to rewrite life: A, C, G, and T. And we will
the proteins of DNA.
Yes. And we collect the genes of all living and ancient and diseased beings on Earth and the plants. They store it. It's a hill. It has valves and refrigerators, and they sequence the DNA of every single living species, and they say we can rewrite with the alphabet of A, C, G, and T.
There's also some.
It's also a narrative,
and that I suppose says something also about the audacity of human and the hubris of humankind that is pretty much a constant in history. And we've seen that now by looking at David Attenborough in his past and in his present, and with this story, and I think the ones that we mentioned, we are sort of between our eyes seeing a future which is also filled with conflict and duality, but it's definitely an interesting one. And Sir David Attenborough, being the helper that he is, helped us see that tonight.
We need his genome.
We need his genome.
We have it
And
actually.
before I let you all go, because I think I want
Can I
to...
just share this about the letter?
Yeah,
So the letter was supposedly licked by him before closing. So
this one. Yeah, so the Luke, my colleague, he also sent me a picture of the envelope, and he said maybe David Attenborough licked it. So then you only need to bring this to the Chinese gene bank, and then we can clone and de-extinct David Attenborough soon.
And otherwise, we have the liar bird who can
Exactly.
imitate him. Yeah.
And we're not ending the evening before we're going to say, have a look at the lyrebird, have a look at the cordyceps, listen to the Bon Bibi story. There's much more on the Bon Bibi story coming in the future, I hope. There's many more things that we wanted to show.
yeah,
But I think I'm going to leave it at this for now and hope that we continue this conversation on David Attenborough at the bar. And perhaps he's there because he went to the program to the rise of authoritarianism and the appeal of the radical right. Maybe he was there. Thank you all for coming, and I wish you a very pleasant evening. Thank you so much.
thank you.